The woman who leads the U.S. Air Force just wrapped up one of her most inspiring personal missions, cheering on some of the troops who risked everything for their country and now work to overcome their challenges through athletic competition. Vladimir Duthiers of our streaming network, that's CBSN, flew with Secretary Deborah Lee James for a story that you'll see only on CBS This Morning. Vlad, good morning.
Good morning. James is the 23rd Secretary of the Air Force and only the second woman to hold the position. She oversees a budget of nearly $140 billion and an active force of over 300,000 men and women. But it's looking after the welfare of those who serve under her and their families that she considers the most important part of her job. Yeah, let's do it. We hopped the flight with the Secretary of the Air Force, Deborah Lee James. Our destination, West Point, the U.S. Military Academy, to watch the final day of the Warrior Games, an annual Olympic-style competition for wounded servicemen and women put on by the Department of Defense.
These are survivors, but more importantly, they are thrivers, and they are demonstrating resiliency, they're demonstrating teamwork, the power of camaraderie.
Some of the athletes have obvious injuries, but many are broken in ways you can't see, suffering brain injuries and post-traumatic stress, what the Secretary calls invisible wounds.
Invisible wounds may be invisible, but they are real, and they are serious, and our job, my job in the Air Force, is to give visibility to the invisible wounds of war.
Chris Farrell, who competed in track and field events and is a member of the Air Force sitting volleyball team, suffers from post-traumatic stress.
This is my first Warrior Games as well, and it's been about recovery, not only for just the adaptive sports side of it, but also with the mental and the personal side.
And they're like, you've changed so much.
Mallory Dinkle was injured in Kuwait when the vehicle she was driving was run off the road. What does it mean for you to participate in the Warrior Games?
It means the world to me, and it feels good to be around people that I don't have to pretend that I'm okay around. No one's judging. It's honest, like, it gives me goosebumps. It's such a good feeling.
While the Air Force have had a good showing at the Warrior Games, these are tough times for the men and women who patrol the sky.
We have been downsizing our Air Force for the better part of 25 years. Today, we are the smallest Air Force that we have ever been since we became an Air Force in the year 1947. And when you couple that with nonstop operations in a globally engaged way for the last 25 years, it's also hurt our readiness, our ability to keep going and to do our job.
Yet despite the depleted ranks, a reluctance to commit ground troops to Syria has left the lion's share of the battle against ISIS to the Air Force.
Well, what has been going on in the Middle East, both against ISIL in Iraq and Syria, and then, of course, there is also ongoing operations in Afghanistan. It has been a strain on operations. We're deploying people much more frequently.
Is it troubling to you that, in talking to some of the men and women today, that they've deployed so often?
Well, it's the world that we live in. The world is very complex, and we are a globally engaged Air Force, so we don't get to take a day off.
Secretary James told me her #1 priority is taking care of the men and women of the Air Force. That includes increasing diversity and improving pay and compensation. It also means looking after her people when they are no longer able to serve, which is why the Warrior Games are so special to her. I was watching you during the volleyball tournament, and you were sort of like, almost like you were back in high school or something, cheering for the team. You're like jumping around and waving and screaming. Like, what was that like?
It was fantastic. Well, you were there.
Yeah.
It was a great game.
It was
a great game. It was a nail biter. It was very exciting. Being able to compete like that means the world to them. It means the world to me as well.
She's considered, she was called the sledgehammer when she was a lobbyist on the Hill. So I have no doubt that she's going to be able to get done some of the things that she wants to do. But you know this, Nora, from the Invictus Games, because that came from the Warrior Games, right? When you talk to some of these soldiers, these airmen, these airwomen, one guy, Robert Harper, Staff Sergeant Robert Harper, he lost his friend in an IED explosion, and he said now he is a Y in his life, the Warrior Games.
You can tell she's not phoning it in. She is in it.
Yeah.